Hello and welcome today to the Cybersecurity Conference 2022. My name is Liam Lynch. I'm from L2 Cybersecurity Solutions, and today I'm here to talk about mitigating malware and ransomware attacks. So, just to give some maybe quick background on what is malware. Malware is a contraction of malicious software. And it can apply to many different types of malicious software, like viruses, worms, Trojan horses. And these are from many years ago. We've had viruses for decades now, since back in the 70s and 80s. These are like little pieces of malicious code that attach themselves to program files, like an actual biological virus. And then when you execute those actual programs, the virus will execute itself, and then it will try and replicate itself to other programs on your device. A Trojan horse is kind of similar in a way, but it doesn't replicate in the same way a virus does. And it's just that the malicious code is inserted into a genuine program, like a calculator application or something like that, that there will just be malicious code inside in that application. And a worm then is kind of a variation of a virus in that it makes its way across a network, infecting computers remotely by just going across a network, infecting it and moving on to another device or another computer. So those are what we would have known in the past as malware. And ransomware then is kind of being a new variation on malware. And what it does, it's a specific type that it will scramble all of the data that it can find on your computer, on your device, on your network, any kind of files that it can see. It will scramble all these files, and then it will put up a notice demanding payment for the files to be unlocked or unscrambled, or decrypted is the correct term. And if the criminals have been in your network for a while, they may have also stolen lots of data that they could find, juicy data, company secrets, or health information, any kind of those type of files. The criminals may have downloaded those files to themselves, and then they will look for additional ransom from you to not post those files in a public domain. So it's kind of being, you are getting ransomed on the double. So how does a ransomware incident get initiated? How does it get into our systems? Well, in the olden days of ransomware, it was very, very common to come in through a phishing email, usually with maybe a link to a website that would download malicious code onto your computer and execute it, or through an attachment to an email, which would have macros installed in them, which would then reach out to the internet and download malicious software from a server controlled by the criminals. It would come down and then infect your computer. And then it may also then look around inside your network. If it can worm its way onto other devices in your network, then it would work like that, which was quite, the famous WannaCry ransomware and NotPetya ransomwares. They were they were a worm type ransomware that moved its way around a company network. So that was what they would have done typically. They may also install some software that might just call back home to the criminals, sometimes referred to as Cobalt Strike. This is a specific type of software that will enable remote access for the criminals to be able to come in to your network at any time and extract data from it, and also to help them spread around. The next vector then for getting in would have been through remote access gateways. And this particularly sprung up during the pandemic, when people were sent to work from home. The companies would have had to set up some kind of remote gateway so that the staff could remotely connect from home into the office environment to be able to access the systems. The thing was, a lot of these got set up very, very quickly. There wasn't a lot of consideration given to security and keeping these remote access gateways configured correctly and updated. But what then happened is the criminals were able to scan the internet, find these remote access gateways that were badly configured or weren't up to date, and they were able to come in remotely. That way, any time of day or night, they could get into the network and gain access to all the devices behind it. And the third kind of vector for ransomware getting in could be through an insider, whether there might be an inadvertent, innocent party, maybe plugging in a USB key that they found in the car park, or maybe somebody of a malicious nature. They may have been bribed by the criminals to stick in a USB stick that has ransomware on it, and that would execute it as well. So not very common, but it is still a potential vector for ransomware. So the question goes, should you pay a ransom? Well, you've got to understand that the ransomware gangs that are out there that operate these different types of ransomware software, they're organized criminal gangs. They are into all sorts of other illegal activity, like gun running, drug smuggling, human trafficking, all these other nasty kind of criminal activities, and they're making a lot of money from ransomware, which it can be used to subsidize all of these other activities that they're doing. And they do have much better budgets for dealing with software, because people pay them, they've got huge budgets, they can invest in their product and make it even better, which is kind of really crazy. Like, some of the budgets could be even bigger than likes of Microsoft and Google might be able to put towards protecting their customers. So that's what you're facing here, is criminal gangs. They may be on sanctioned lists, which, if you're dealing with any of the kind of Russian ransomware gangs nowadays with the war in Ukraine and all the sanctions that are applying to Russian organizations, it would possibly be illegal to pay these gangs. Then you've got to ask, like, if they say they have stolen data and that they will delete it, and they won't post it if you pay them that extra money, are they going to actually delete it? I wouldn't trust them. They're criminals. They don't care. They'll probably come back and look for more money from you. And you might have cyber insurance, but if you tick some boxes on your policy document to say, oh yeah, we've got good backups, or we've got firewalls in place, or you've got staff training and all the various measures that you can take, but if it was found out that you didn't apply those measures, or you didn't have them in effectively, you may not get insurance coverage to pay the cost. And one of the greatest misconceptions I've come across in regards to ransomware is that people are out there just saying, look, the ransomware got in, it's affected us, so just pay the ransom, we'll decrypt our data, and we'll be back to working. Like, it happened in a few minutes, we can get back to working in a few minutes. That's not the case at all. In the first case, ransomware is designed to encrypt things very quickly, but it may not be designed to as effectively or efficiently decrypt the data after the fact. So, it could take a long time to do so. But, what's worse is that criminals have been in your systems. Paying the ransom and decrypting your data does not get them out of your systems. They could still be in there. So, like a ransomware incident, when you see it happening and your systems are all disabled, or all the screens are up with a message saying, give us money, you're going to be there looking at this and thinking, it's terrible. It's like being burgled. Somebody's broken into your premises, they've ransacked the whole office, they've taken things out, they've stolen your valuable goods. It's just like a burglary. And if you just go ahead and just pay the ransom to decrypt your data and think you're going back in business, all you're really doing is just putting a plaster over it. You're not doing enough to be able to protect your systems from potential future compromise. And it's not a theoretical compromise either. It's been shown, like in this survey, that in cases where people just paid a ransom, got their data back and took no further action, in 80% of the cases, the criminals came back, they looked for more ransom, they scrambled them all over again, they had to go through the whole process of paying the ransom and restoring their data again. And the real kind of killer here with this one is that in about half of the cases where people were getting their, paid to get their data back, half the cases they didn't get all of their, some or all of their data back. Ransomware scrambles files, it can corrupt them, it can make them unusable. And the decryption tool, may not be adequate and well tested enough to be able to bring your data back to life. So you just simply cannot trust that just paying the ransom, getting your data back is a good way to operate. So, it just doesn't. You have to take additional measures, which I'll get to momentarily, things that you can do to protect yourself from ransomware. So, because you're in a situation, if you weren't prepared for it, you see these messages up on the screen, you're going to be, it's going to be like a deer in the headlights. It's going to be staring at it going, what do we do? What do we do? If you're panicking, you're going to think, yeah, look, there's a message here, we pay this money, we'll get our data back. Let's just do that and we'll be back in business quickly. We won't have to go to the expense of trying to get our backups and restore from them. But as I say, you do need to take additional measures, but what you really need to do before you have an incident is decide now whether you're going to pay a ransom or not when you face it, or if you're going to take, take a proper approach and execute an incident response program, which will go ahead and clean up your systems, get the criminals out of there and restore all your data and get you back operating correctly and securely. But make that decision in a time of where you're relaxed and you can have a measured conversation about it, not when you're staring at a message. So some steps, I'm going to go through some 5 kind of steps that you can take that you can help to prevent yourself becoming affected by ransomware in the first place. It's not impossible to protect yourself. You can take these measures, and prevention is way better than the cure. It really is. So it just needs maybe a bit of time and effort to set it up properly. But once it's done properly, you'll be well protected. So the first one, and this goes for any kind of a protection against any type of threat that's out there on the internet, putting in place multi-factor authentication is absolutely the number one protection measure you can put in place that will protect you. Having a password to access your systems on its own wouldn't be really considered too secure, even if it was a really long, complicated one. Because if a criminal managed to get you to divulge your password through some nefarious means, some phishing or social engineering attempts, if they can get you to give up your password, they can sign in, they're you, they can do whatever they want and that your account can achieve. But there are other authentication factors like getting an SMS text message, which may be not the most secure, but if there's nothing else available, it's better than nothing. You can use an authenticator app, which could maybe use push notifications or generate random codes for you. Or you can get security keys like that are just plug into the USB port on your laptop or on your smartphones, and you just press a button there to do the second factor of authentication, which they would be considered the most secure. But as shown here in this report from Microsoft, their cloud clients that had enabled multi-factor authentication, which I think the recent figures were about 11% in total of their clients had done so.
99.9% of those accounts were protected from account compromise attacks because they had multi-factor authentication.
It really is simply the best protection you can kind of put in place in your environment that will help to keep your accounts secure. Then making sure that your staff get some training on kind of the risks that are out there, of what the criminals can try and do, the kind of dodgy emails they might send or dodgy messages or attempts to get people to divulge their credentials. So train your staff. I would often recommend, at least having an annual kind of in-person or online instructor-led training to get into the real good details and have a back and forth discussion about the what people have actually come across in their day-to-day lives, and and also then to be able to tell some stories, which is really effective. You can then reinforce this training maybe by having some online self-paced training, just to kind of top people up on the what's going on the internet and the risks they might face and the measures they can take to protect themselves. And you could also maybe look at some phishing simulation tools, which would send safe phishing emails to staff to see if they did accidentally or inadvertently click on a link. So that might help to create some reports to show that how effective the training they've received is, and if there are some staff that might need some additional training to help boost your protection. Backups then are another supremely important measure that you can take to help protect from ransomware, because if your data is all scrambled, if you've got good backups, it's really important that you can then restore from those backups to get your data back to where it was. So a basic kind of a backup strategy I always recommend, if you don't have anything in place that suits your business needs, is a 3-2-1 backup rule, where you would have 3 copies of your data, one of which is your primary copy that you work on every day, and the other 2 copies then should be on 2 separate media, kind of like maybe external hard drives or magnetic tapes, or even the cloud could be considered another type of media. And having one of those copies should be off-site. So, if you have, say, a disaster like a fire or a flood in your premises, your off-site copy could be used to recover your data that might have been lost on-site. And then the other copy, another one of those copies should be offline. So by offline, we mean that it's not connected to your network or to any of your devices when the backup has been completed. That way, ransomware won't be able to see it because it's not connected. So the ransomware won't see it, the ransomware won't be able to scramble it. So you'll be protecting your backup that way. It's really important though, particularly if you have some kind of devices that, or media that might be potentially damaged by dropping or stuff like that, like you can drop an external hard drive, you can ruin it, so that you test your backups on a monthly basis just to see, is this device okay? Can I read the date on it? Are the files okay? Are they not corrupted? So it's really important because you're going to depend on that, your backup in a time of crisis. So, it's best to just check those just randomly. You don't have to test everything, just a random sampling of files on a monthly basis. But then have a look at and determine if you had a complete disaster where everything was destroyed, all of your data was wiped out, and you are now depending on your backups. Find out how long it will take to recover your data. Know this in advance. Because if you're using some kind of a backup methodology that it's quick to back up, but it can take forever to restore from, may not be an adequate backup strategy. You might need to look at something that you can recover from much more quickly. It could be a case that you might have to recover for, if it comes up and says it'll take weeks to recover your data. That can't be sensible at all in any decent business case. So figure out how long it will take to recover your backups, and if it's not suitable, change it. Put something in place that you can recover from quickly. Keeping all your systems and devices all fully updated and patched as appropriately is again critical. That's particularly for your remote access gateways and things. That's the way the criminals got in there at the start of the pandemic, for poorly configured or poorly patched devices. So make sure, let's say, that all your mainstream stuff like your desktops, laptops, the operating systems are fully up to date, and all your applications, your browsers, your Adobes, your Office, whatever mainstream applications you use, you keep them updated. Any of your smart devices, smartphones and tablets and things, again, they should all be already set to automatically update. So just make sure that goes on and does happen. Then other things that need updating, and in these cases you would need somebody with some IT experience to do this for you, because there are risks associated with keeping these things updated, so you need somebody technical. So things like your network router, switches, firewalls, they should be checked for updates, possibly on a quarterly basis should be adequate there. Printers, printers, they have software on them. It's called firmware. It is software. It can be compromised by criminals and has been in the past. So keep your printers updated. And any kind of, those smart devices, your bulbs or thermostats, things like that, they all run some software called firmware again, and you want to keep them as up to date as possible. Now, some of the cheaper ones may not have the capabilities of being updated, so I'd make sure you keep those kind of those devices on maybe separate networks so that they don't connect to your main business network. And finally, there your website. Websites these days are basically a whole heap of software, possibly made up of the likes of what you might hear of as WordPress or Drupal or Joomla. These are just pieces of software that make up our websites. So again, you'd want to keep those updated on a regular basis, because don't forget, your website is on the internet 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the criminals will be hammering at it trying to compromise it. So keep your websites up to date as well. And then the final measure you can take is restricting access to the bare minimum for all of your staff and for all of the equipment you have. Like, keep all your networking equipment that you might have, your firewalls, your routers, etc. Keep them physically locked away so that nobody can gain access to them to maybe plug something in, like a USB port, or even connect a new device to your network. You want to restrict that kind of level of stuff, that somebody might come in and drop a really tiny kind of a computing device and plug it into a network port, just hide it underneath a table or in behind somebody's desk, something like that. So try and keep all your networking equipment locked away. Advise your staff that when they're getting up to step away to get a coffee or go grab a bit of lunch or something, that they should lock their computer. It's Windows L will automatically lock your computer, and just hitting that, that's secured so that nobody can come along then afterwards and access their system as if they were them. Depending on the size of your business, you probably should only have one administrator account. Now, there may be cases in larger enterprises where you would need maybe more, but limit the amount of actual fully functional administrator accounts. And then it should only be used, it should only be signed into when you need to carry out an administrator function, like setting up new users or taking down former users, etc. So really limit the time it's used. Never use the administrator account for accessing email or browsing the internet or anything like that. Just administrator functions. And start your staff, if they're being set up for the first time, start them with the bare minimum of access, like basically nothing, and just say, right, what does this person now need to have access to do their job? We'll only give them that level of access to that folder that they need, or that printer that they might want, or have they got full-blown access to the internet, whichever it might be. Just start from nothing and just move it up just ever so gradually, just so that they can do their job. And keep that kind of under review, just to make sure that as they say with your company that they might be given additional roles and responsibilities, that maybe some of their former roles and responsibilities and their former access may no longer be needed. So carry out a review, maybe revoke some of the old access that they might have had, if they no longer need to do it. So keep that under review, limit the access as much as possible to all of your staff. So that's it. I'm here now available for any questions that you might have. So thank you for listening to my presentation.